everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pooja and you're of course watching Ready Set Pooja. If you're coming back to the channel, thanks so much for coming back, and if you're new, thanks so much for stopping on by. We're getting pretty close to hitting 150 subscribers, which is really exciting news because I feel like we just hit 100, so thank you so much for everyone new who's been dropping by the channel. I hope to keep creating content that you guys find interesting and exciting, so just let me know what you're looking for and I'm happy to try and create more vlogs and things like that as well. I do have a couple of interesting different videos planned coming up soon, so I'm excited to show you guys what that all looks like. But today's video is just your generic wrap-up video. I'm going to be wrapping up what I read in July. It is August now, and honestly, like I've been saying for the past, I guess it was just the last wrap-up, but like I said last month when I did my June wrap-up, this summer has not been great for reading. The main reason is because as things have opened up a little bit more and it's easier to go out and do social things, it has made finding time to just like stay by myself and read become a little bit harder than it was throughout most of lockdown and quarantine over the past year or so. So I'm just trying to like get used to that new normal again. So I haven't been reading as much the past couple of months as I did for the preceding few months before that. So that means there's a little bit less content in these wrap-ups, but hopefully that picks up again in August. I do have some time off in August, so I'm excited to take that and not be working for a little while, and hopefully squeeze some reading in while I'm doing it. Cool, so let's just jump right on in. I have 3 books to talk about for this month, which again is a lot lower than it usually is, but they were pretty varied different types of books, so I'm excited to talk about them and share them with you all, and hopefully you will enjoy. So let's get right on into it. The first book that I have to talk about is this book of essays called Lewis and Clark Through Indian Eyes. So actually one of the things that I was able to do at the end of June was actually take a trip to South Dakota with my family. We went and explored all the different landmarks there, which is really, really interesting. And of course, in South Dakota, there is a lot of Native American indigenous people's history. The Lakota Nation is very strong there. Many people in that part of the country are descendants of the native populations of that area. And so there are many different stores that have a lot of books that share Native American perspectives. And while I was there and I was just perusing through these bookstores, I was like, hey, I haven't really read that many books by Native American voices, and it feels like it was a big gap in my reading. So I picked up this book of essays. It looked really interesting, so I just wanted to delve into it a little bit. And I'm also really excited to hopefully read a bit more Native American authors who have written novels and fiction books. So I'm definitely trying to incorporate more of that into my reading moving forward. But basically this is a collection of 9 essays, all of which are centered around the Lewis and Clark expedition and the effect that it had on the native populations of the areas that the expedition went through. If you aren't familiar, Lewis and Clark are 2 famous American explorers during the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. They set out on a journey to get to the Pacific Ocean and basically mapped a lot of the American West, which was still pretty unexplored at the time by people in the US at the time, which was actually like mostly just the East Coast. And so it was a path-breaking journey, but it also had a lot of effects on the people who are already living in those areas in the American West, who are of course many different tribes that were already there. Of course, one of the most famous interactions that they had with an indigenous person was Sacagawea, who was the wife of one of the explorers who was on that trip, and she ended up actually guiding a lot of that journey as they went towards the Pacific Ocean, because she was able to, speak the language of many of the indigenous populations that they met, and was able to make sure that people didn't get killed because of misunderstandings. So she was instrumental in that journey. So this was actually a really interesting book of essays. It brought up a lot of things that I hadn't really known about before, so I'm really glad that I picked it up, and I would recommend taking a read through it if you're interested in that part of history and getting a voice that is not typically represented when you read about the Lewis and Clark expedition, because it's typically just told through reading like their diaries, or like a Western scholar will talk about it, and that doesn't really capture the essence of the effect that this expedition had on indigenous people, who for them it was like these were the first white Americans that they were meeting in many cases, and it just signaled a lot of strife and suffering that was to come. Some interesting fun facts that I read about where, for example, one essay talks about how the Shoshone tribe, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, had its own form of democracy, but when Lewis and Clark were writing about the systems of government that these indigenous tribes had, of course they always looked down upon them and felt like American democracy was the paramount type of government that you can have. But many of these populations already had similar types of democracy. In the Shoshone example that's given in the essay, they democratically elected a leader based on whatever task the tribe was taking. So if it was a fishing expedition, people would follow one person who they really trusted to lead that. If they were going to be arranging some kind of festival, people would follow a leader who they felt comfortable organizing something like that, etc., etc. But none of these systems of government were really recognized as legitimate when the literature from the people who were explorers in this context actually wrote about them. So this was a really, really illuminating read. I would recommend, and I definitely want to read more Native American voices moving forward as well. The next book I have to talk about was actually an ebook that I read on my Kindle, and it was, I think the title was just Dilwale, Dulhania, Leigh by Anupama Chopra, and this was actually funny because I saw a documentary about this in the airport when I was flying out somewhere. And I was like, this is so weird seeing like DDLJ, which is a really famous Bollywood film from 1995 starring Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol. It's kind of considered a quintessential film of Bollywood. It is a, just super famous. Everybody has watched it. Everybody's seen it in India and most of South Asia, actually. And I saw this documentary in the airport that was talking about, the cultural effect that this movie has had. And Anupama Chopra, who is a pretty famous critic, she runs a critic company called Film Companion in India. She wrote a book kind of analyzing its cultural effect on Indian cinema and Bollywood cinema in general. So I just downloaded the book because I thought that was really interesting after watching that. And yeah, it was really short, and it wasn't anything particularly illuminating, but it was interesting to read about the effect that this film that I love and hold close to my heart and have, always had references from when talking to many of my South Asian American friends, and just have really enjoyed throughout my childhood, seeing what actual cultural effect it had. And it's actually cool because it is, I think, the longest running film of all time in the world. It came out in 1995, as I said, and it's still running in a theater in Mumbai called Maratha Mandir. And so it's kind of cool that it's like literally still running in the theater and people still go and watch it whenever it's playing. So yeah, it was a fun little read. I don't know if I would, tell anyone that's highly recommended to pick up or anything. It was an average book, but it was fun. I read it in like an hour, and it was a nice little thing to read on the plane. So yeah, it was fun, light, but nothing groundbreaking necessarily. So if you're not, a diehard fan of DDLJ, I don't think it's worth picking up. So yeah. The last book that I read in July was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. If you saw my June wrap up, you know that I read the entire Shadow and Bone trilogy, which is right here on my shelf, in June. And so I moved on to Six of Crows next. So I read the first book. I am currently about halfway through Crooked Kingdom, so that will be part of my August wrap up. Yeah, I loved this. I mean, I kind of have the same thought process about Six of Crows as I did about Shadow and Bone. I love this world that Leigh Bardugo has built and loved the interpersonal relationships between the characters. Six of Crows specifically, I think the characters were just like really the backbone of the story. Like, the plot was exciting, it was fun, it was like a heist type of story. but it's the interpersonal dynamics and relationships between each of the people in it that makes this book so exciting and so fun to read, and you're really just rooting for all of the characters. I think out of the Crows, my favorite stuff, unsurprisingly, is probably the banter between Nina and Matthias. And of course Kaz is such a badass, and Inej is amazing. And after watching the show, I think everybody was in love with Inej, and then after reading the book, it's like, yeah, she's so cool and like such a rock star. So yeah, I love this. I will talk about this more in my August wrap up when I've actually read the entire series and can talk about Crooked Kingdom as well. But yeah, it was great. It's really fun fantasy. It's a wonderful universe that Leigh Bardugo has built. So I'm excited to finish up this duology and then be done with all 5 of these books. And I think there's a couple other books that Leigh Bardugo has also written that take place in the Grishaverse. So I might pick those up later on. But also it'll be like 5 books that I read in the same universe at that point. So it's probably also time to pick up something different and read that as well. So yeah, that was everything that I read in July. Like I said, pretty sparse reading month because I was pretty busy doing a lot of other things, just trying to figure out the right balance of what to do with my time now. But hopefully I figure that out sooner than later and start reading a bit more than I have been this summer. And yeah, I'm super excited for what comes next. I've got a lot of fun books ready to go for August. One of the big things I'm trying to do is read as many of the long-listed books for the Booker Prize, which was just announced on Tuesday of this week. The shortlist will be announced in September, so I only have like a month and a half-ish to read all of them. But so I don't know, if 13 books in a month and a half, unsure if I can do that, honestly, but I'm going to try and read as many as I can, and then hopefully I'll make like a little prediction video for the shortlist. We'll see. I'm not promising that. No promises, but that might happen. But if you are interested in reading Booker Prize nominated books, Eric Carl Anderson has an amazing channel that is largely, he talks a ton about books that book prizes and books that are nominated for them, and I thought his Booker Prize long list analysis video was really, really good, and it helped me sort of prioritize which books I was most interested in off the long list. So if you're interested, I'll put the link down in the description below. You should go check that video out, and you might find something that you enjoy on that list, and I will keep you posted on my reading from it as well. So yeah, that's all for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below if you have something to say about what I had to say. And yeah, that's all we got today. I will see you guys next time. Have a good one. Bye bye.